Now, I wanted to look at the time when possibly the Antichrist may come. And obviously, nobody knows, right? In the end, this is, if you will, to a certain extent, is a certain level of speculation. So we don't know for sure. I will mention some of the things that some people are talking about, but we'll also show you the difficulty in trying to predict when these things will happen. So the first thing I suppose I'm going to look at is the idea that from the birth of Israel, we can add 70 years to the birth of Israel as a nation, or rebirth, I should say, of Israel as a nation, and we can have an idea when possibly, the last 7 years will start and the Antichrist may show up or the rapture will take place. That depends on, what you believe about the rapture. So if you add 70 years to 1948, you end up on 2018. Well, obviously 2018 has come and gone, and though great changes have taken place since then, we still can't say that it is the last 7 years. Now, obviously the last 7 years can start 7 years prior to the end of the 70 years. So in this case, if you were to add 63 years to 1948, you would end up in 2011. So that was the first possibility if this speculation or calculation is to be correct. 2018 was the second. Now, some said that a generation, and if we want to base this on generation, right? Because when Jesus said this generation shall not pass, some people base it on that and say a generation is usually 70 to 80 years. And so if we take 80 years and add to 1948, we end up in 2028. Now, if the rapture starts before the 80 years are out, you subtract 7 years from that, and that puts us in 2021. Well, we're in 2021. This could definitely be the beginning. We just don't know. Of course, another possibility that is there that people may not consider is that Israel only took over Jerusalem in 1967. And so, can Israel be complete or be considered a nation without Jerusalem? That was their capital for so long. Can you say Israel is a nation without the capital? So if one wants to argue that, then you got to start the count from 1967. Well, if you start the count from 1967 and you take 70 years, for example, and subtract 7 from those, so you're adding 63 years to 1967, you end up in 2030. Right? So from there, that would be the first possibility of the last 7 years starting. But if you add 70 years, you end up in 2037. If you add 73 years, which is 80 minus 7, right? You end up in 2040. If you add 80 years, you end up in 2047. So it is not so simple, to be able to say exactly when these things will take place, because the calculation is not so easy to make as some would want us to believe. Of course, there's even a third possibility or a place to count from, is when Israel actually rebuilds the temple. And as of yet, the temple has not been built, but let's just say the temple is being built or will be built next year, right, in 2022. If you add 63 years to that, you end up in 2085. If you add 70 years to that, you end up in 2092. And if we're still talking about a generation, we're talking 80 years. So if we want to subtract 7 years, just in case that, the 80 years closes the whole cycle, you add 73 years to that, you end up in 2095. And if you add 80 years to 2022, let's just say the temple will be built next year, like I said, you end up in 2102. So trying to calculate the time is not so easy to do. Now, I suspect that one of these things is probably correct. I'm just not sure which one. Of course, I wanted to show you at least what some of the Jewish rabbis consider when their Messiah will appear. Obviously, we as Christians, at least some of us as Christians, believe that this Messiah that shows up and gives Israel what they want, including rebuilding their temple, will be the Antichrist, not the real Messiah. But nonetheless, they believe it will be the real Messiah, and in a certain sense to them, it will be, because they expect certain things to happen when the Messiah comes. But here's how some of the rabbis calculate the possibility or speculate when the Messiah might show up. One calculation is that they should calculate from when the Dome of the Rock was completed, which was 962. And they're basing their calculation on the days that are being described towards the end of the book of Daniel, when the angel says that it will be 1,290 days. So they took this 1,290 days and took each day, and each day is considered a year. So then they took 129 years and added it to 692, which was the day that the Dome of the Rock was completed. Obviously, they would consider that as the abomination of desolation. And so that's where they counted it from. Of course, the text continues to say in Daniel that, blessed is he who waits to 1,335 days. So if they add that to 692, they end up at 2027. So according to this interpretation, or should we say calculation, they're expecting their Messiah, right, to show up the latest, they would say, before 2026, because he would have to be, if you will, in power in Israel in 2027. However, some of them expect him to come a little bit sooner than that. Perhaps they say he has to come between September of 2022 and 2023. That's just what some of them expect. Now, not all of them believe this, but at least some of them actually believe this. And this is when they're waiting. So, of course, there's other, should we say, entities that are making plans and are trying to achieve certain things by the year 2030. They're looking into being able to transfer, if you will, the mind of a person into a machine, or perhaps biomechanical, or of computer of some kind, to be able to transfer the mind of the people, or should we say of a person, into this machine, and they want to get that done by 2030. Of course, there's other agendas in the world that are taking place that are also being planned, and they're shooting also for 2030. So it would seem that perhaps a lot of things will be accelerating, and have been accelerating, and will keep on accelerating into 2030. Obviously, I don't know. We don't know for sure. I'm just giving you, some of the interpretations and some of the plans that are made by different people and different organizations. Now, there's other people that have studied and looked at the writings of the Essenes, and they divided the calendar in jubilees, and their last jubilee, which is a period of 50 years for them and their calendar, starts in 2025. Some have pointed to this as being significant, and some have even speculated that perhaps this is when the last 7 years begins. Again, I don't know. I have no way of knowing if this is the case or not. But I just wanted to show you that there's expectations, and that there's possibility, and should we say biblical calculations, or should we say biblically based certain calculation or speculations on perhaps when the things will take place. But ultimately, we don't know. I don't know when this will take place. It does seem like between 2025, even now, but especially between 2025 and 2030, it will be a very significant period of time with great transformation taking place in the world. I honestly don't know if that's the case. I do think that these crises will keep coming and they'll keep increasing in intensity all the way until the rapture, at which point the Antichrist takes power and brings a certain level of peace and prosperity in the world, which in the end ends up in a disaster. But those are some of the things that I had in mind. And one thing that I wanted to mention, just as I was preparing for this, that a new statue or sculpture just went up at the United Nations, and guess what it's called? It's called Peace and Prosperity. And it kind of resembles the beasts that are described in Daniel in the book of Revelation. So, seems that somebody knows something, or perhaps they're just inspired to put this statue and this sculpture before the eyes of people, to perhaps have a certain level of psychological effect on their mind, to tie the events that are happening to the Bible and to what is written and prophesied in the Bible. Obviously, certain people know that what the Bible has said and it will happen, and they actually take it as a blueprint for them to bring about the kingdom of the Antichrist. And for a little while they will succeed. I'm going to put a picture here as I was telling you about this new sculpture. Interestingly enough, they named it Peace and Security, and this, by the way, is in the Bible, is when it says that when they'll say peace and security, peace and security. So this is their goal. A great disaster will come. They will probably achieve that peace and security for a while. But nonetheless, this is what I had in mind for today. And it's an overview of what the point of these crises are all about, and what this period that we're going through, especially the church, is all about. And for the church, though, as scary as these things are, and as difficult as they are, this is a period of washing, or if you will, of healing, which is why I call this channel the healing season. Because Christ does intend to wash his people and heal them from their doubt, and heal them from their lust, and heal them from their distrust, and from their earthly mindedness. He intends to heal their minds, their hearts, so that way their desires will be totally fixed on him and him alone. When the church gets there and their prayers turn from everything else to come, Lord Jesus, that's when the rapture will take place. Until then, I am convinced that until then, the rapture will not take place. Because if it does, about 1% of the people will go. And I'm speaking of those that claim to be Christians. And in my estimate, that would be a disaster. Of course, in the end, only God knows what's going to be. But nonetheless, this is what I have for you today. Next time, I'm going to begin a series. I'm not entirely sure how I'm going to do it. If I'll do multiple episodes, or if I'll do one long one, when I'm going to look into the details of what Christ actually does and works in us when he takes us through these crises, or through the storms of life. In this case, through this specific end time storm, or should we say multiple storms. He's after something, and he's doing something in us in the middle of these storms. And he wants us to learn something and be able to practice something, to practice that which we learn in the middle of this storm. So next time, that's what hopefully by the will of God, this is where I'll get to. But until then, thank you for listening. And I pray the blessings of God upon you, and look up, for your redemption draws nigh. We'll see you next time.